I was in a boardroom with glass walls and a view that was supposed to impress people like me. Elaine Whitaker, my wife's mother and the company chair, didn't blink when she said, "You're done here, Grant. Results aren't there." The HR rep beside her looked like a court reporter, and the two security guards at the door didn't move. I said the numbers were solid, the cost savings documented. She just shook her head. "It's not personal." I'd heard that line before from people who like to make it personal. They walked me past the team I'd hired and trained. Not one of them met my eye. I left with a banker's box, my chipped mug, a photo of my boys from my first marriage, and a notebook I wasn't leaving behind. The drive home was quiet, my palms sweating on the wheel. I didn't turn the radio on. When I opened the door, Lauren, my wife, sat at the kitchen island with a whiskey in front of her, calm like she'd been expecting this. She slid a printed sheet toward me. Weekly rate hotels, a couple of men's shelters, 2 storage facilities. One line was circled, closest to bus line. "Now that you're not employed, this doesn't work," she said, flat as a slate. I stood there, holding that paper, knowing this was all planned. Mother and daughter rehearsed, evaluated, like I was a quarter that didn't hit the earnings forecast. I didn't argue. I packed 2 duffels, grabbed my laptop, and the labeled Old Taxes drive. What they didn't know was that the core routing engine I had been developing was registered under a Delaware LLC. I set up 18 months earlier, written in my own words. The renewal window was coming fast. I left quietly. Behind me, the dishwasher hummed like nothing had happened. I drove off with a single thought on loop. I was done. 4 years earlier, I'd given a talk at an operations summit in Cincinnati. I was walking through predictive lane allocation for freight networks. Boring stuff for most people. But there was one in the crowd who actually seemed to care. She sat in the 4th row, taking notes like it mattered. That was Lauren. She asked me a sharp question about balancing depot churn against backhaul reliability. Not the kind of thing a marketing person asks, which is what she told me she did for a living. I remember thinking, she gets it. We ended up talking for nearly 2 hours in the lobby after the session, then another hour over coffee. I didn't realize it at the time, but I'd met something rare, someone who understood the work without having to perform it. We dated slow, breweries, minor league ball games, drives along the river. She never rushed me, always checked if I was comfortable. At least, that's how it felt. Later, I learned it was really just her way of assessing me. But at the time, I believed it was respect. Her family came up piece by piece. "Old Midwestern money," she'd say. "We keep it understated." When I met Elaine, Lauren's mother, it was like stepping into a different world. Firm handshake, eyes that weighed me like produce. "You're interesting," she said. I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning. After the first family dinner, my older brother called me. "Be careful, man," he said. That house felt like a museum with guards. I brushed him off. I'd been on my own since I was 19, bouncing around from one consulting gig to another. I figured I could handle a mother-in-law with opinions. Lauren and I got married 1.5 years after that conference. It was a small ceremony. Her taste, clean lines, muted colors, no drama. I wanted simple, too. We said all the right things. I believed most of them. 2 months in, Elaine offered me a role at Whitaker Logistics. She said it like she was giving me a favor. "You'll have stability, no more bouncing around to client sites. We take care of our own." It was a cut from what I made consulting, but Lauren kept talking about building a life and being home for dinners. So I told myself it was an investment. Men my age pull the short straw sometimes. We call it responsibility. The first week on the job, they handed me maintenance. Not strategy, not architecture. Maintenance. Updating rate tables, tuning alerts. Work a junior analyst could do with a manual and coffee. I pitched ideas that could shave fuel losses, reduce missed windows across 3 regions. I built models to prove it. They nodded. Then they shelved the work. Not aligned with messaging, they said. At home, Lauren started speaking in phrases I didn't recognize. Optics, cohesion, alignment. It sounded like a presentation I wasn't in on. That's when it hit me. I should have known better. When a family says you're part of them, but draws a map for where you're allowed to stand, you're not family. You're just set dressing. My title said Senior Network Optimization, but I was the son-in-law in rooms that mattered. There were jokes, always about how it was nice to have a guy who will stay past 6, and then there were notes from Elaine about my tone in emails. The unspoken message was always there. Don't embarrass us by failing. At her weekly dinners, I got the chair that faced the door, like a guest. Between the roast and dessert, she'd ask about provider responsibility and family reputation. It wasn't hard to figure out. I wasn't in the family business. I was just another piece of the puzzle, one I didn't get to control. At home, Lauren started going quiet. The phone was upside down on the counter, the screen lighting up with work stuff. She'd take late calls with her mother, her voice low, like they were conspiring. She stopped asking about what I was building. Instead, she asked about my calendar, where I was going, what time I'd be home. When I showed her the models I'd put together, how the network could predict choke points a week out and pre-stage freight, she nodded, but that was it. I got pulled into side meetings, the kind that started with staying in your swim lane, like I wasn't even in charge of my own work anymore. Men don't talk about it, but getting framed as dead weight when you know you're carrying more than your share, that sticks. It changes the way you walk into rooms. It makes you swallow your pride and learn to play the game, even when you know the rules aren't fair. The provider speech hit different now. It always came from the people who locked the doors to the rooms where money was actually decided. They'd talk about responsibility, but never opportunity, never accountability. I stopped arguing. Arguing didn't get me anywhere, not with them. So I did what men do when they're boxed. I built an exit without announcing it. I started spending nights in an empty office, the fluorescent lights buzzing above me as I assembled HarborNet, an adaptive routing core that fed on live constraints and learned from misses. I registered Porter Analytics LLC in Delaware, filed provisional patents in my name, and wrote a license with a clause that most people would skim over. If the creator is treated in bad faith, unilateral suspension on renewal. At home, Lauren thanked me for not traveling so much anymore. Then she forwarded me an email with a list of polos Elaine liked for company functions. The color choices were exactly the Poliet of their brand. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. I archived the email and pushed another revision of HarborNet through the LLC. Then I stayed up late again, barely sleeping, but my mind wasn't just racing with work anymore. It was building something I had built in secret, something of my own. I paid cash at a roadside hotel that smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet. The clerk didn't look up when I handed over the cash, just slid the key across the counter without saying a word. I asked for the top floor and a room near the stairwell. Habit. I needed the quiet. Needed to be far from anyone who might wonder what I was up to. The room was small, cramped, but it was mine for the night. I spread out on a little round table by the window, the one with the cracked paint, and opened up the HarborNet license. 34 pages of plain English, but it was the last paragraph that mattered. Section 11C, unilateral suspension in the event of bad faith treatment of the creator. Creator, defined by patents, all filed under my name. The renewal was coming up in 48 hours. I didn't waste time. I turned off auto-renew. I didn't crash anything. I wasn't about to. I just let the validation checks start failing, one by one, like lights cracking in a long hallway. Each failure a signal they wouldn't see coming. I wrote the notice, suspension pending renegotiation and resolution of grievances under the good faith clause. I copied legal, ops, and the person who had told me my tone needed work. I scheduled it for 6:05 a.m. Then I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling. My mind was already spinning, but I couldn't pull it together enough to sleep. Sleep came in broken pieces, like shards of glass. A few hours later, the phone started ringing. At 6:41, it was the office number, then another call, then a private line. By lunch, I had 64 missed calls and messages that went from polite to panicked. But I didn't pick up. By mid-afternoon, my mother called. I answered it, mostly because I wasn't sure I could stomach another call from anyone else. She's 72 and still works a short shift at the clinic because she hates sitting around. Her voice was steady when she asked how I was doing. I told her everything, about being fired, the list Lauren had left on the counter, the clause in the contract, the timers winding down. She didn't hesitate. "I've got $36,500 stashed away for emergencies," she said, like it was just a simple fact. "It's yours, if you need it." I sat there with my eyes closed for a minute, letting her words settle in. It felt like I was 20 again, and she was handing me gas money to get me through the rough spots. "I'm okay, Ma," I said, but I needed to hear that. She didn't press, she just said she loved me and hung up. That night, I got 2 emails from competitors who'd heard rumors that Whitaker's secret sauce wasn't actually theirs. I didn't answer those either, not yet. I wasn't ready to make any moves, not until the clock hit 0. But the fact that they were already sniffing around, that told me everything I needed to know. I sat there, phone still in my hand, the hum of the hotel's outdated air conditioner mixing with the stillness in the room. What came next, I wasn't sure, but I knew I had time. Time to play it right. I sent the email at dawn on day 3. No greeting, just attachments. The license, the patent filings, and a single sentence. "You fired the architect, the building noticed." At 7:12, Elaine's number popped up. I let it ring 4 times before picking up. The silence between the rings felt like a countdown. She came at me with the same old moves. "Let's be reasonable," she said, like it was a negotiation. "The market is watching." She threw in a couple of lines about offering reinstatement, a bigger title, a better package. It was almost laughable the way she said it, like I'd been waiting for her to throw me a bone. I didn't bite. "I don't want a title, Elaine. I want truth on the record. Board minutes stating the license structure, public acknowledgement that my division hit targets, a formal statement of material breach, and a new agreement that actually priced the tech the way it should have been priced from the start." There was a long pause, and I could almost hear her running the math in her head. Finally, she asked, "Are you trying to destroy Whitaker?" I wasn't trying to destroy anything. "No," I said. "I'm done letting someone else take my work and hand me a smaller check for the honor." She didn't say anything else. We hung up. By the time I closed my laptop, there were 3 new offers sitting in my inbox. One from Iron Peak Logistics, one from a nationwide carrier with a rough culture I didn't trust, and one from a fast-growing outfit called Gray Harbor. Iron Peak's message was short, clear, and respectful. "We know what you built. We want you to lead it here. Name your number." The signing bonus they offered made me sit back for a second. It was more than I'd ever seen in one place. But money wasn't the only reason I picked them. It was the culture, their focus on operators, their no-nonsense approach. I knew this was the place for me. The boss there wore scuffed boots on site tours. That mattered. I asked for autonomy and a team to hire. They said yes by noon. I sent one last email to Whitaker's counsel, outlining the dates, citing the clause, and detailing the renewal suspension clock. No threats, no chest thumping, just simple facts. I wasn't trying to make a scene, just making sure they understood what was coming. Then I shut off my notifications. For the first time in days, I walked out the door, down the block, and took a slow lap around the block. My legs felt lighter than they had in years. I wasn't carrying that weight anymore, the weight of trying to play nice, the weight of being someone else's pawn. I took a breath. Felt like I could finally exhale. 2 weeks into Iron Peak, Whitaker released a statement at 4:10 p.m. On a Thursday, something about governance review and temporary leadership adjustments. Anyone who knew the game could read between the lines. Trouble. Freight trades picked it up, and before long, analysts were publishing cautious notes about license risk and single point of failure exposure. A couple of Whitaker's longtime clients called Iron Peak to compare approaches. We kept it polite. Lauren called once. I didn't answer. The second time, I picked up. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice flat, like she'd practiced it. Elaine had a plan, and she thought stability mattered more than my pride. I wasn't in the mood to play nice anymore. "You handed me a list of motels," I said. "That wasn't stability. That was exit management." There was a pause on the other end. She didn't argue. She just said, "I didn't know how to do it any other way." I hung up without saying goodbye. A few days later, Elaine asked to meet at a diner off the interstate. I had been waiting for this. I picked a booth near the window, ordered coffee, and let her arrive on time like she always did. When she walked in, I noticed it immediately. She looked smaller. Not physically, but in the way she carried herself. Like she was the one who'd been cornered. She didn't order. She just sat down and stared across the table at me for a long time. "I fired you," she said finally, like she was explaining it to herself. "I fired you because I couldn't stand the parts of the business I couldn't name or control. And you made those parts visible." I listened. I didn't need to say anything. She knew what she was doing, trying to justify herself. I spoke slowly. "The license stands as written. We can negotiate a fair rate, a clear service scope, no more favors, no more seats at dinners, no more speeches about provider optics." She nodded. I saw the calculations running through her head, trying to figure out if this was something she could outlast. But she couldn't. Her worst habit had always been thinking she could. Not this time. Lauren tried one last angle. She showed up at my office the next week, holding flowers that looked expensive and out of place in her hands. She talked about starting over. Just us. No family input, no business agenda. I saw it in her eyes. The same tired hope. But I knew better. "I believe you mean it," I told her, my voice even. "But I also believe that moment would end the second your mother called." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't say anything else. She left without a fight. I didn't want to talk about it anymore. I told her I wished her well. I meant it, but I didn't. Mostly I wanted the subject to be closed. I went back to the apartment, quiet, with a decent view of the skyline, a space that felt like mine. I opened my laptop and signed a renewal with Whitaker. A new contract at a rate that finally respected the tool I built. The kind of rate I should have gotten from the start. That night, for the first time in months, I slept a full night. No more staring at the ceiling. No more running through options in my head. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Iron Peak gave me room to work. They let me take HarborNet 2.0 and wire it into 3 regions, then roll it out nationwide. On-time delivery improved. Detention fees dropped. But what mattered most to me was that the drivers noticed. The routes made sense again. That last part, that was worth more to me than any press release or flashy article. When the drivers see the change, you know it's real. Rebecca, the CEO, didn't hover. She didn't micromanage or give me that look like she was waiting for me to slip. She asked hard questions, listened to the answers, and said, "Call me if politics ever outweigh logic." I never had to make that call. I knew I was in a place where logic still mattered. We started a small mentorship program, a way to bring in mid-career guys who'd been labeled set in their ways by people who'd never touched a load board. Tuesday mornings, we'd meet in a spare conference room, coffee in a thermos, no slide decks, no corporate fluff. We'd walk through real problems and fix them. I wasn't there to lecture. I was there to listen, to help them make the work their own. One of the younger analysts, Darius, showed me a prototype he'd been working on, yard flow optimization. He'd built it on his own time, no push from anyone. I liked that. I gave him time on the clock and my best people for 3 sprints. He made it hum. That was the kind of thing that lit a fire under me. I got asked to speak at a conference in Denver. The topic they pitched was Lessons from a Quiet License War. I turned it down. Not the title I wanted. Instead, I asked them to call it Owning Your Work. I told the room what I wish someone had told me when I was 30. Don't sell yourself cheap just to be allowed in the lobby. 3 months after our diner meeting, Elaine sent me a handwritten letter. She apologized again, but this time there were no strings attached. No, let's make it right. She didn't ask for anything. I put it in a drawer, and that's where it stayed. Lauren's brother reached out with a single line. "I don't agree with them, but I love my sister." I told him I understood. Family's messy, even when you don't run freight through it. Iron Peak had fully adopted HarborNet 2.0 as their core system. They rebranded it clean, credited me and my team internally, and, this part mattered, they credited us on the paperwork. I didn't need my name in lights. I needed it in the contracts. That's what really counted. On a Friday evening, a few months after I started, my mother came by the office. She walked the floor like she owned it, touched the whiteboard markers like she was making sure everything was in place. She stopped in front of my desk, looked around, and said, "Feels good in here." She was right. It did. I stopped checking Whitaker's stock after that. The numbers still came across my radar, but I didn't go looking for them. Letting go wasn't some dramatic moment. It wasn't some grand "I'm free" speech. It was just the day I forgot to check. The day it didn't matter anymore. 6 months after I left, Iron Peak held a small cookout by the loading bays. Folding tables, plastic chairs, a line of crock pots someone had labeled with tape and marker. The kind of simple thing that made it feel real. Drivers, planners, analysts, all of us together. No speeches, just food and the radio. Darius came over with a paper plate, laughing. "My grandma cried when I told her they put my name on the patent continuation for yard flow," he said, his voice warm, the kind of smile you can hear. She kept saying, "My boy's on a document." That did more for me than any bonus ever could. A little later, I ducked into my office, closed the door behind me, and answered a number I didn't recognize. It was Whitaker's interim counsel. Calm voice, no drama. She told me they'd filed minutes acknowledging the license structure and the bad faith breach. Public record, no spin. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, saying little, just listening to words I didn't think I'd ever hear from that side of the fence. When she finished, I thanked her and asked for the link. She sent it before we hung up. I read the document once, then I closed it and didn't save it. I didn't need a trophy. The fact of it was enough. That night, in my small apartment, the one that fits me just fine, I sat down and wrote an email I actually sent. To Darius, to 2 ops guys who stayed late every Thursday, to a dispatcher who caught mistakes before they became costs. I told them what I wish someone had told me when I was younger, when I was too busy trying to be useful to the wrong people. We're not lucky to be here. We earned it. The work belongs to the people who do it. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from my mother. "Proud of you, kid." I'm not a kid. I'm 58, with a bum knee and an old pickup that rattles at 60. But I'll be her kid forever. I poured a splash of bourbon, sat by the window, and watched the lights wink in the distance where the interstate bends south. A couple of trucks rolled by, that steady hum I've loved since I was small. My revenge, if you need to call it that, wasn't the outage or the panic. It wasn't the collapse I'd left behind. It was the ordinary hum of a system that's mine by right, running clean, because the right people get the credit and the authority to keep it that way. Tomorrow, I'll review a proposal for the next build, teach a Tuesday group how to debug a bad lane, and call my mother about Sunday lunch. That's the life I wanted before the boardroom and the list on the counter. It's the one I kept, and finally, it's the one I own.